This is your daily briefing and you're most welcome to it. So, transfer window, done and dusted. It's all over. All the speculation, all the misdirection, all the fibs, untruths and general craziness has passed us by. But I'm actually impressed with you. I've got to say, I did a piece on theboyhotspur.com this morning because for so long, the recurring theme for all of us has been this business of being shortchanged, let down, cheated. Oh, where's my watch? You know, hey, my wallet. You know, every time we have anything to do with Daniel Levy in the transfer window, and I kept on. You know, I feel I was very honest with you about some of the people that were in our sights allegedly, and we'll come back to that because there's some metaphorical kickings at you, I think. But I put, long and short of it is, I don't think it was a disaster. And I think time will tell, which is a horrible way to end anything. But perhaps if we start from the perspective of time will tell. But I put a community post up on this channel this morning and asked how you felt about the transfer window. Our transfer business, and I deliberately used the word felt because I'm always banging on that feelings sometimes aren't as useful as actual facts, if that isn't too obvious. And the results are obviously ongoing, but you've got three choices: happy, sad, undecided. And happy 30%, sad 21%, and undecided 49%. And I've got to tell you, I'm slap bang in the middle of undecided. I really am. But it's pleasing that only 21% of you are sad, because I think if you actually take a step back, because sometimes, you know, they talk about muscle memory. I think we've got Tottenham Hotspur transfer torture memory. And every time we do business, it's always like, how is this going to go wrong? There's something here, you know. We have form for buying players with backstories. We have form for buying punts that have not in a million years are going to go anywhere. So there's always the prospect of disaster or, you know, some sort of failure is always looming. And I think this window, there are possibly, because I'm undecided, there could possibly be room for a little bit of cheer. And the only way you can approach this is if we move a little bit away from the feeling side of things and focus on some real facts. So this is the kind of boring bit, but look at what Tottenham have done historically. And Tottenham very rarely spent in ever, but in January has definitely been the poor relation of the two windows, and I don't need to tell you that. It is very unusual that January, and I think this window, I'm going to go through that on a separate chat at some other time, but I think this window was probably busier for everybody because of what we've inherited with the sort of COVID pandemic and this, that and the other. So I think there were a fair amount of houses need to do a little bit of fine tuning, a little bit of housekeeping, opposed to just kind of pinch their nose and sail through the whole thing. So let me run through with you the backdrop to this. And this is the last decade. I think if we go beyond that, it's a bit like, you know, these dreadful pundits, and they say, oh, it was in 1803 that Leeds United came here and drew a top. Nobody cares, dim and distant. But if we look at the last decade, and I'm just going to spin through it with you, because the names, some of the names I'd forgotten, you know, and yeah, so hold on to your hats. 2010-11 season, Spurs brought in Bongani Khumalo and Stephen Pienaar. And if I told you the numbers involved in these, the monies that went on, talk about change down the back of the sofa, but that's where we were. 2012-2013, Spurs brought in Zeki Friars, yeah, there you go, and Lewis Holtby. This is one, just to really add some perspective for you. Dele Alli landed in 2014-2015 season. And here we are, cheerio, good luck, all those years later. Fast forward to 2017-18 for the next incomer, and it was Lucas Moura. And quite a big spend, over 30 million on that. 2019-20, Gedson Fernandez and Steven Bergwijn. arrived in N17. And any seasons that were missed out there, obviously Spurs didn't do any business. And we've got the whole thing of when Poch was around and, you know, there was just in the top 5 leagues of Europe, nothing bought for 500 days. So if we look at the business that we've done this window, and I'll give you the snapshot summary here so you can see it, and we're looking at the most signings in one winter transfer period. The most business Tottenham have ever done in the last decade is 2 signings, and then Conte, this is for the last decade as well, he's signed 3. Average signings to Spurs 0.9. Conte 1.875, but bear in mind where Conte's been. He's been at clubs that spend a bit more reliable spenders than Tottenham, and most spent in one winter transfer period. And this is the killer, because you can't argue with this. And then I also think the way Spurs have set this up, I think there's even more credit due. So Spurs, the most they've ever spent before was €34.5 million, 1920, and Conte, and this was when he was at Chelsea in 2017-2018, he blew 53.8 million in the winter window. So we see that summary, and that, you know, nobody, it's just across the trend across all of the clubs, nobody, you know, is prolific in the winter window. But Spurs brought in Kulusevski, and he's only costing 10 million for, you know, in inverted commas, for the rest of the season. But should certain targets be hit, and I was amused to death, quote Roger Waters, but I was amused to see some clown blog website this morning had put up their starting 11, their strongest Spurs starting 11, and immediately dumped Dusan, which just struck me as absolute naivety at its very worst. But and why is it naive? Okay, I'll tell you. The deal here is that he's costing 10 million, so, you know, he's what he is. But should certain targets be hit, the option to sign a player permanently is a further 35 million. So what you've got here is an obligation for Tottenham. I mean, subject to the environment being right, subject to the relationships being right, all these other little bits and pieces we get with transfer deals and players moving from one league in a part of the world to another league in another part of the world, all of those ifs, buts and maybes. You get the option. The onus here is to get the best out of him, Champions League qualification, and to hit a certain amount of games. And what you want, what anybody wants, because whatever you think of Levy, and I don't think a hell of a lot of him, but whatever you think, if they're going to get a guy in, they want him to work. You know, I mean, one of the things that Levy has just certainly been guilty of over the years is, I believe, from my own eyes and what I've heard and read, is that Levy has pushed the notion, the suggestion to various managers to play so-and-so. Come on, we bought him, let's give him a go, let's get him out there. And whilst that's irritated the life out of many of us, you can't deny it exists. So I don't think that Kulu is going to sit on the bench. Depends how he gets on with Conte, but he's coming in from Juve with his mate. I don't see... I'm struggling to see the negatives, is what I'm saying to you. And we've got Bentancur, who came in for a reported 15.8 million. Now the thing is, if we add all of this up, and the total amount that might be payable, we get 60.8 million. Are you still awake? 60.8 million. So that's even my poor maths. That's more than 53.8 million, going back to the Conte number when he was at Chelsea in 2017-18. So if we're going to talk about what is realistic, then is it reasonable, or reasonable opposed to realistic? But if we're going to talk about if it's reasonable, how much money could have Daniel Levy sanctioned to be spent in this window? Then if you said, well, is it reasonable that he spent more money than Conte did at Chelsea several years ago? You'd go, so therefore, he's kind of over-delivered. Now, how these players work out, I've got to tell you, that's entirely, who knows? But this is where the smart thing comes in, because we own Rodrigo Bentancur. That's a done, finished deal. That's now he's ours. He is no longer anything to do with Juve. But if Kulu doesn't work out, we can return him, and it's 10 million quid, which, you know, in the scheme of things. So, to me, that's 50% of our activity, and I've got to say that it strikes me as being cautiously good, you know. But what's really good, and I don't think this is up for debate, but as ever, if whatever I get wrong, put it in the comments. What I don't think is up for debate is he got rid of Deadwood. And if you spoke to one Spurs fan in the last 6 months, year, you spoke to 1,000, they all said the same thing. Their ambitions were all channeled down to the one thing: get rid of the Deadwood. So Jack Clarke's gone. And I don't think it's worth jumping on these people's graves. I think a lot has been said. I think too much has been said. Far too many column inches have been shed over players that simply didn't deliver for us. So Jack Clarke has gone. Good luck. God bless. Goodbye. Tanguy Ndombele, Bryan Gil, Giovani Lo Celso, Dele Alli. Now, I appreciate some of them are on loan and some of them could come back, but you can't keep chiselling away at the good that somebody does in order to deride it and demean it. And I think even for somebody like me, who is a self-confessed not Daniel Levy's #1 fan, have to acknowledge that, well, if you wanted him to spend a fair whack of money, he did it. And you can't, you know, he's done it. Or the potential commitment is there. There's always a caveat. And if you wanted him to get rid of the Deadwood, to a large degree, he's done it. So it's difficult. Now, I mean, you could say, well, we didn't get so-and-so and we didn't get him. Well, I tell you why we didn't get them. It's because there's a lot of work before Tottenham Hotspur as a football club is healed. And by healed, I mean that the stadium and the sort of football that we play actually attracts people. Because right now it doesn't. And this is the problem. It didn't before either. And I keep on going back, bless him, to Carl Walker. Before the doors were opened to the new place, he'd jacked it in. He'd fled, scarpered. He was off like a scolded cat because he wanted money and honour. And he's got a stack, shelves full of honours and a bank full of money. So he wasn't wrong. So any player that swerved us this window, I'm not angry with Levy about it because that's futile. And equally, I wouldn't have put the onus on Levy to correct the mistakes of the past in one winter window, which historically, a decade's worth of evidence shows us that it kind of wasn't the right place, the right time anyway. So we've gone from a scenario, I believe, whereby Conte was looking at the ejector seat button quite lovingly, to the fact that I think his kind of faith in the process, in the whole business of Paratici and Levy, is kind of a little bit more restored, or it should be, unless he hates these two Juve players and cannot believe the stunt he's had pulled on him. But I'm cautiously optimistic. I genuinely am. I don't know how more functional we'll become, but I tell you something, I know from business, and I know from, even relationships with people in a pub, you take out the bad apples and things improve. I don't like the word exponentially, but you know what I mean. That things improve. And if you've got a work environment and you take out a bad apple, somebody just doesn't fit in, he's not one of the firm, he's not on the team, you get rid of that person and just the atmosphere improves and then productivity improves. You know, and it's like you're in a pub and there's a group of people and the one guy is a bit of a, and if he doesn't come in, the atmosphere doesn't sour. I could go on. But I like I say, he spent money, he's got rid of the Deadwood. Do you know what? The only thing he could have improved on for me is if yesterday, when there were the protesters at Hotspur away, if he'd put pointed the sprinklers onto the front lawns, that would have been good. Well, anyway, that's your lot. Good luck. Keep it on.